the CIA moved right in as soon as Kennedy was killed. By 1964, the CIA was running covert operations out of USAID. This has all been declassified. It's all available.
Okay, this is declassified.
This is declassified. It's available at the National Security Archives at George Washington University.
Okay, so for this example, since it's declassified, can you explain what that one looked like? Well, the context of all this and what we're talking about, and I appreciate you running through some of that again, just so people can hear it because you saw this hands-on, but the context has to do with an organization like USAID and how it may be used for terms of soft power.
Yes.
Now, we pulled up a link right here just for people to review. I know you and I were talking about this a little earlier before we got on camera. Alessi, can you scroll down a little bit? These are just some highlights, if you will, of different things that have been uncovered since they started investigating this. So you have $14 million in cash vouchers for migrants at the southern border through the State Department. You have $20,600 for a drag show in Ecuador through the State Department. You have $7,071 for a BIOPC speaker series in Canada through the State Department. Like, I could go on and on. They all are like that pretty much. Now, the fact of the matter is when you add up the money on this sheet, to you and me, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
To what the actual budget is, it's a very small percentage of it. But like when I see things, the carelessness of like $10,000 to pressure Lithuanian corporations to promote DEI values through the State Department. John, do you know what $10,000 buys you?
Yeah, nothing.
I can get like an editor in Venezuela for that.
Yeah.
That's it. All right. Like I think you said it. You put it best. You're like that could buy you 2 Facebook ads.
Yeah, that's it.
And they characterize it as pressure.
Pressure.
Now to you and me, $10,000, very small part of the budget here, but that's a lot of money to me. It's like if they're this careless with that $10,000, how many other things are they this careless with? And what does any of the stuff you're seeing here, which frankly a lot of the highlights that they've decided to pick out because it is, and I'll be fair, like it is a Republican who's pointing these things out.
Sure.
They're picking out the LGBT stuff and the DEI stuff because that's like the, soup du jour right now.
Right.
But like when you add up probably all the things that are in that type of lane, like something that seems totally unnecessary, it probably adds up to a lot and is something where we've lost the oversight completely in the organization.
Mm-hmm. You're exactly right. 2 years ago, I was one of 6 independent journalists who were invited to have lunch with the Russian ambassador to the United States, and we went to the residence. It was this big formal deal. So it was the ambassador, the deputy ambassador, and like 3 of his staff members and 6 of us journalists. And he had read articles that all of us had written. He actually quoted them, which really struck me. And the reason for the lunch was, for the most part, he wanted our ideas on how the U.S. and Russia could cooperate in a time of war. And I gave my standard thing: counterterrorism, counterproliferation, counter-narcotics. But the thing that made him angriest was how the State Department pushes LGBTQ on countries where it is culturally unacceptable. And he said, we don't even mind being adversaries on some of these issues. Our interests are different sometimes from American interests. He said, you're right. We can cooperate on counterterrorism. We can cooperate on counterproliferation. That's a great idea. No problem. But don't force us to accept trans people in our government. Don't force us to accept LGBTQ people in positions of authority in the Orthodox Church. We will not do it. You don't respect our culture. And he said that's a bigger problem than not respecting our policies.
Why do they do it? Because like I like living in a country where people are free to be themselves and do what they want to do. That's a beautiful part of America.
Agreed 100%.
It's different when you're pushing, like I would, in fairness to like my gay friends, like this is pushing like some sort of business commissioned ideology on places to make them probably pay more attention to it in a negative light than they would have in the first place if you didn't do it.
Exactly.
So why do they do it?
Some of the people who might be impacted by like $8,000 to promote DEI among LGBTQ groups in Cyprus. Well, everybody in Cyprus is Greek Orthodox, right? The Orthodox Church of Cyprus. There is no such thing as LGBTQ in a culture like that. It's a conservative culture.
Yeah.
It's offensive. I recognize that it's only $8,000, and I'm glad that we have it here. I'm glad. I welcome it. I celebrate it truly. But we shouldn't be imposing our own values, our own cultural values, on countries that don't want it.
Yeah. It seems so, especially when you look at, like I was saying, the amounts, it's not doing anything.
No.
So when you look at,
it's not.
like the devil's advocate to like USAID, and we can talk about this because I think you'll probably have a lot of thoughts here, is that it has to do with this idea of soft power.
Mm-hmm.
And we already mentioned the extreme example of like pushing drugs into other countries earlier. But where there are countries like, I don't know, China, Russia, Iran, who are running around and maybe building roads in places to curry favor.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
Or give debt, basically create debts and say, don't worry about it, but now we get to do this with you. I understand why the United States would want to have things like that. I just don't want to see it have stupid shit like this, and I don't want to see it not have oversight. Does that make sense?
You're right. And then that leads to the question of why is it that the Chinese are building ports and roads and hospitals and airports all over the world, and we're doing that?
Right.
What do we have to show for that? We have nothing.
Crazy.
Nothing. It's like democracy in Afghanistan. This has long been a big deal for me. Why in blazes did we force Afghanistan into a Western-style democracy when in the 3,000 years of that country's history, they never had a Western-style democracy? They had this system called the Loya Jirga, which worked.
What was the Loya Jirga?
It's a consultative council of tribal chieftains. And so if you and I are in a dispute, I say that my land ends here and you say, no, it ends here, and we have a conflict with one another, we go to the Loya Jirga. And we each give our side, and they settle the dispute. Or I want to be the village, tax collector. Let's say we go to the Loya Jirga. I make my pitch. The other guy makes his pitch. The Loya Jirga votes. They choose, this guy.
Oligarchs instead of kings.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So we said, no. We recognize you guys have been doing that for thousands of years, but we don't like that. Instead, we're going to have an election, and we got this guy, Hamid Karzai, and his brother's got a nice restaurant in Baltimore. You can have lunch at his Afghan restaurant. Baltimore is very popular. And so,
is that real?
Uh-huh.
It really did?
Uh-huh.
In Baltimore?
Yeah.
There's like 6 good blocks in Baltimore.
I know, that's about it. And they still call it Greektown. Yeah. And they're like, well, we don't want that kind of system. And we said, yeah, we're not asking you. We're telling you. But then, we're not pushing democracy on Saudi Arabia or on Kuwait or Bahrain or even Egypt, which actually had a democracy for a minute. But when the wrong guy got elected, then we said, no, a coup would be okay just about now.
Why?
Yeah.
Why did we choose? Saudi Arabia, I think, is more self-explanatory.
Yeah.
But like Egypt, why do we decide that's okay there, but not in Afghanistan?
Because the Egyptian populace has an intense dislike of Israel, which is in opposition to our foreign policy. And there are so many poor people. We're afraid of a broad uprising there. They'll throw us out. It's going to be chaos.
What's different about Afghanistan, though? Because there's a lot of poor people there as well. Is it the geography more than anything? They thought they could get away with it?
In part, it's geography, and in part, it's population. There aren't that many people in Afghanistan, and we thought we can push these people around, and we can supply them with whatever they need. We have bases in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. We had the drone base in Pakistan that nobody knew about until a really smart thinking reporter filed a Freedom of Information Act request for all drone fuel deliveries in Pakistan. And they're like, oh, sure, here you go. All the drone.
Someone got fired for that.
Like, what's the harm in asking where all the fuel is coming from or
Right
where the
here.
fuel's going? It's going right here to this base. Oh, wait a minute. That's a secret base? Oh, sorry.
Oh, man.
Yeah. But we just pushed them around.
Yeah.
And it didn't work. I say often, too, that that the Taliban did not descend from the moon, right? And just
They didn't?
softly land in Afghanistan and take over. These are the husbands, the fathers, the brothers of Afghan women. They're Afghan families. This is who they chose to be led by. They had 20 years of American leadership. They didn't like it. And so they chose the Taliban.
Well, we didn't lead. That's the other problem.
No.
We put in figureheads.
Mhm.
We tried to push, as you just laid out beautifully, democracy on a country where that wasn't necessarily what they wanted or
Yep.
what their history wanted. And then we also got, tangled up in a fucking war in Iraq. So we pulled resources.
That's right.
And there was all kinds of shit that went on that led to that steep decline. And it's not even like the whole population supports the Taliban, but the Taliban was able to say, hey, we're not as bad as this.
That's right.
And enough people were like, all right, fuck it.
Yep. That's exactly right. You know, there was another thing too. I remember being there in like 2007, maybe 2007. And we had come up with this just terrible idea to combat corruption, right? Corruption's endemic. It's just a part of the culture. So we decided that the police chief in each province would have to come from another province, right? So the police chief in a Pashtun area was a Hazara, for example. And the police chief in a Baluch area was from, the border with Tajikistan. And they said, well, that way, there's no connection between the police chief and the populace. They don't have anything in common, so it's going to make bribery go away and it's going to make everybody honest. No. They just started killing all the police chiefs. They're like, where's this guy from? He's got Asian eyes. He's not a Pashtu.
Right.
And then they put a bullet in his head. It's like, that was a dumb idea. Who thought of that?
There's a lot of people who play fantasy football with government sitting in offices in D.C. and maybe even Langley and stuff. And it doesn't mean they're dumb. It means that they're not thinking.
No. And they just have no cultural understanding and no understanding of history. I will say that for the most part, the working level Foreign Service officers at the State Department do have that understanding of history. And they tend to focus on specific geographic areas. So if you're an Arabist, you speak Arabic, you're going to spend probably the entirety of your career in the Middle East until you become an ambassador. And then you'll probably spend most of it in the Middle East, even after you've become an ambassador. And, elsewhere in government, USAID, CIA, Pentagon, forget it. I never met anybody at the Pentagon spoke Arabic.
They live in their own worlds. What is it? Where's the State Department in all this? That's actually good you bring that up. Because the State Department, and you've done a great job explaining this in the past. I know Bustamante's talked about this in the past, and Jim Lawler and those guys. Like, they will house a lot of people who maybe work for the agency or even sometimes the Pentagon, like undercover. And then they're also there to be the diplomats and have the embassy and, shake hands and kiss babies. But for things like USAID to happen, you have the intelligence agencies potentially using it as like a money laundering operation to get stuff in.
That's the dangerous part.
But does the State Department know that's happening, or
Yes.
can they just not do anything about it?
Yes and yes.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a formal written agreement between the CIA and the State Department on that addresses cover issues. Sometimes for most of my career, actually for the entirety of my career, now that I'm thinking about it, I was under what was called nominal cover. Like, oh, where do you work? State Department.
Right.
But there was nothing to back that up. You couldn't call the State Department and say, can I speak to John? And then, they route the call to me. That just didn't exist.
Oh, you didn't even have a cover back
No.
then.
No. I was declared to so many intelligence services, it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. So there's this formal agreement between the State Department and the CIA, like there is between the CIA and other governmental bodies. USAID is an unusual situation, though. I never, ever encountered a CIA officer who was embedded in USAID. I don't think that happens. It wouldn't make sense anyway. Because
Really?
Yeah, because when you're embedded, you have to do that cover job for 8 hours, and then you go out and do your CIA job for 8 hours.
That's right.
So if you're going to be given some kind of official cover, you don't want it to be USAID where you actually have to do the work. You know, you want to be, I got to be very careful here. But you want to be in a position where you can sort of blend the two. Yeah.
Why do you have to be careful here?
Because the details are classified.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's not have another trial.
No more trials for me. Thank you.
So you got to blend the two.
We'll
leave that there.
Now, the reason I said that this is a problem is that to use a phrase that I heard this week on the news, USAID was a beachhead for the CIA in the State Department. That's not what USAID is supposed to do. USAID is supposed to be, digging water wells and training doctors and, building sewage treatment plants and electrical grids and helping people develop. It's the Agency for International Development.
Which was like John F. Kennedy's
That was the plan
of it. Yeah.
The USAID, the Peace Corps, and VISTA were all created at the same time by John Kennedy. It was a great idea.
Yeah.
But the CIA moved right in as soon as Kennedy was killed. By 1964, the CIA was running covert operations out of USAID. This has all been declassified. It's all available.
Okay, this is declassified.
This is declassified. It's available at the National Security Archives at George Washington University.
Okay, so for this example, since it's declassified, can you explain what that one looked like?
Yeah.
Because now I'm a bit confused because you're saying you wouldn't go undercover there, but there's a blend of the two.
They did not have people undercover at USAID. What they did is they ran covert operations through USAID.
English.
Okay. In 1972, Ted Kennedy wrote a letter to the CIA, and he said, this is also available declassified online. So he said, I heard that the CIA was paying Laotian mercenaries through USAID, just cutting payroll checks.
Yeah.
Is that true? And so he got a letter back from Henry Kissinger, who was the Secretary of State at the time.
Real straight shooter, too.
Oh, yeah. He's never going to obfuscate.
Phenomenal guy.
He got an identical letter from the CIA, like identical to the word, saying, yeah, we're using USAID essentially to launder money and pay these Laotian mercenaries to fight communists. And Kennedy's letter said, did you pay these people in 1969? And he said, yeah, we paid them in 69 and 70 and 71 and 72. Like, what are you going to do about it, Kennedy? Well, that was just one of many, many operations that was paid for through USAID. Here's another thing. And this might be a better explanation.
I love when John starts cooking. That's great. Really good. Chef Curry with the shot. Keep going.
There used to be a senator, a Democratic senator from Wisconsin by the name of William Proxmire. Proxmire was famous for a couple of reasons. First, he won the seat that Joseph McCarthy vacated when he drank himself to death.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So he was a liberal Democrat. There he is, Bill Proxmire. And he was famous also for never spending a single dollar to get reelected. He said, the people of Wisconsin know my voting record. They either like it or they don't like it.
And he got elected?
Time after time after time. Yeah. He finally retired like in the 70s, like 76 or 78, something like that.
I've never heard of that before at any point.
When did he retire?
It looks like
Senator, 89. Okay, so he was around for a long time.
Yeah.
From 57 to 89. So he hated government waste more than anything in the world. And he decided to bestow an award, kind of a gag award, called the Golden Fleece Award for the fleecing of the American taxpayer. And he would do it every month. Every month he would call a press conference.
I like this
to issue the Golden Fleece Award. The problem was a lot of what he identified as government waste was actually secret CIA programming.
So he couldn't say it.
No, he said it anyway.
Oh, he did?
Uh-huh.
And he didn't get arrested?
The CIA was apoplectic.
I'll bet.
Because he would say, $5 million to study, gay monkeys in Gabon. And he's like, what the fuck is this? This is a waste of the taxpayers' money. Well, of course, there was no $5 million to study gay monkeys in Gabon. That's just what they called it.
Code word.
Yeah. So that the CIA, because you can't go onto Google and look for the CIA budget.
You can't, but do they have to create like a shell company on the other side? Meaning like a company called like Research for Gay Monkey Studies.
There are probably...
And there's really mercenaries behind it who are like, thank you for the money?
There are at least hundreds of those.
Right, okay.
Maybe thousands.
So they got to try.
They got to try.
Got it.
Yes. Yeah, but the thing is, the CIA's budget is hidden all around the rest of the federal budget.
Yeah.
Okay, it's not just in the State Department, not just in the Defense Department or the Commerce Department. It's everywhere. And so they'll say $5 million for gay monkeys in Gabon, and they'll put that at USAID. Or they'll put it in, the whatever, some fund for the National Geographic Society or whatever. They're not really going to spend that money on that. They're going to spend it to, buy weapons for Laotian mercenaries. Or, bring drugs to Los Angeles or whatever.
Thank you for watching the video, guys. If you haven't already subscribed, please smash that subscribe button and check out this clip's full podcast episode by clicking here or in the description below.